All right, good evening and welcome to cost accounting. This is cost accounting, by the way, but just a reminder, what we're doing here is a combination of cost accounting and financial management. So we are about to transition to financial management, but I thought before doing so, we should just take this time, now that we don't have many classes, just to go through, to give it a bit of time on cost accounting. But again, bear in mind that beginning of next semester, which is going to be the second semester, we are also going to be running cost accounting classes concurrently with financial management classes. So whatever we do here, we are going to be repeating again, possibly with quite a number of other people from the semester module. So we are still going to have the chance to go through that. So those of you that were with us also on the from the beginning of the year, I think you do remember that we are also running financial management concurrently. So I'm sure you would remember that we covered ratios. We also did capital. All right, just give me a second on that. Right, I was saying we did capital budgeting, which is capital appraisal, and then capital structure. We also did that, and then towards the end of it, I think we're doing company valuations there. So we are going to be redoing that there. So those ones were optional, but again, I was strongly advising that you become a part of those classes. All right, so the first question here, so this is adopted from the question bank. I think after that, after I read out the first question, we're going to go back to the top, and then you can get a chance to see what question we are dealing with. So it's from the question bank. I think you already have this question bank. If you don't have, I think anybody that has it, you can just post it in the group there. All right, so first question is calculate the total budgeted break-even sales value of the tennis division for July 2015 and ignore the possibility of discontinuing sales of Wilson tennis rackets. All right, so break-even, I think you are aware by now, almost every test that you have, almost every exam that you have is going to require you to do break-even. So at the end of all our sessions, you should be in a position to calculate break-even even with your eyes closed. All right, so we are dealing with the tennis division. As a reminder, we are dealing with the tennis division and we're looking for the break-even. So I'm going to be doing the workings here on Excel, right? You can have a look at where I'm going to be doing the workings. So I already put up that there for question A, all right, A1. All right, so there we go. So once you get a question, oops, I think I've gone too far. So once you get a question like this, so this is junior sports 3.4, right? And the question needs you to do your break even. Always remember the formula, right? Let's just say break even. Let's put it up as break even. So if you do remember, it's gonna be your total fixed cost. Let me write it correctly. Total fixed costs. So which means sometimes because we are dealing with cost accounting, you might be tempted to only put manufacturing costs here, but we are dealing with the total fixed cost. So it basically means if you have got fixed admin costs, you need to put them here as well. So you are basically taking all your fixed costs, and then you're going to be dividing that ideally by contribution per unit, right? But for the most part here, we're going to be dealing with this as contribution per batch because you are likely going to be dealing with one product. It's going to be multi-products that you are dealing with. So this is what we are looking for, right? This is what we are looking for. And then after we get this, so what this gives us here is break-even units. Let me put it correctly. It gives us break-even units there. But the question is break-even sales value. So your starting point is to get break-even units, and then after that you multiply those units by the selling price, right? Selling price, and then from there it should get you to where you want us to be. All right, so I'm gonna put this up this way. All right, total fixed cost, we can put that under. All right, I'm not sure if that's going to need a working, but we can as well put it under working 1. So which is something that will most likely, the format that we'll most likely be using on our exams and tests. And then this, we're going to put it under working or calculation number 2. All right, let's come down here and put our calculations. So our calculations always need to be correctly referenced. Calculations, so let's put on calculation 1. So calculation 1, we need total fixed costs. All right, so we're gonna fetch that now from the information. So we are dealing with the tennis division. All right, so there we go. So the tennis division currently sells 2 types of tennis rackets for children: a Wilson tennis racket, a Wilson racket, and I don't even know how to pronounce this now. Babolat, I believe. Okay, we'll just call it B racket. All right, and then these ones here are becoming, the latter are becoming increasingly popular. Right, the sales forecast for July in 2015 tennis division is based on 400 B rackets and then the 200 Wilson rackets. So bear in mind that every time we are going to be doing break-even analysis, we are basing this on budgeted information. There is never going to be actual information. You use this to budget to decide how many units you need to sell in order for you to break even. So you don't do it after you sell, you do it before. So this is what we are given. So based on quantities of 400 and 200, B is going to be selling at 550, while W is selling at 350. And then the variable cost per unit is given there as 400 and 220. Right. Earlier in the course, I think we are defining what contribution is and the importance of contribution. But I think in any case, I'm going to resume and finish up those notes that I promised to give you guys. I have a lot of time now, so I'm really gonna do that. And then the common fixed costs, which is fixed costs are your indirect costs, right? For these 2 brackets for June 2015 amounted to 35,200, right? So this is actual information. The forecast is July, right? So we are dealing with July. So June 2015, the actual is 35,200. So then the common costs can only be avoided if neither of the 2 racket types are sold, as they relate to the cost of common facilities. So this makes sense in general when you are describing fixed costs. So once you don't produce any of these, it's likely that you might not incur those fixed costs, right? But if you are producing one of those, one or both of those, then you are going to incur those fixed costs. So it is expected that the fixed cost will increase by 7.5% in July 2015. So you already know what the fixed costs are going to be. So we simply need to increase this 35,200 by 7.5%. So in most cases, the typical exam questions or test questions, you will be having different categories of fixed costs, right? Where you need to identify from the scenario. I don't know if you remember one comprehensive question that we did earlier. It was an assignment, a costing assignment, where we had to fetch the different, maybe sometimes you could be told that your rent is going to increase by 10% or whatever it is, but they are basically separated, those costs. So you will have your fixed selling costs, and you might have your fixed admin costs, and then you might have some other fixed costs, maybe salaries. So you just need to total them up together. So in this instance, we do have them comprehensively. So under normal circumstances, because if they are to mark you on principal marking, then they need to check if you basically included all the fixed costs that need to be included. All right, so we have 35,200 and then 7.5%. Let's just sort that out there. All right, so it's 35,200. We are increasing that by 7.5%. So you do so by multiplying by 1.075. So how do I know that? 7.5% is basically 0.075, right, as a decimal. So if you're increasing that, you are basically adding 100%, so which is 1 as a decimal 1.0. So 1.0 plus 0.075, it's going to give you that 1.075. So if you multiply that by the initial fixed cost, that should basically give you the fixed cost for July. So 35,200 was June, but you do not need June now, you need July. So 35,200 times 1.075, so that would give me 37,840. So you take that there, 37,840. So we already have the first amount there, 37,840. Right. So remember, at any given point, if you are to make any adjustments there on your calculations, or if you are to make, if for some reason you realize that this amount is wrong there, whenever you're making adjustments, remember to come back to your calculations again and make an adjustment there. All right. So now what do we need here? Now we need contribution per batch. So you are basically following the same format when you're doing break-even analysis. You are doing the same thing over and over again. The only thing that's going to be different is what constitutes your fixed costs, what products are you dealing with, but otherwise the method is the same. So it must be fairly easy for you to get over 50%, because if it's principal marking, then we want to see if you know how to calculate contribution. For instance, are you following the right procedure? Right? Do you have the right formula? How is your application of the formula? This is what is ideally being checked there. All right, so let's have a look at products that we are dealing with here. It's Wilson and Babalat. All right, so let's copy that and paste it there. Let's put it somewhere there. I think that should just about do. Now we need Wilson there. All right. So in terms of your workings, you can pretty much follow any format that you want, but just ensure that your workings are clear. All right. So more appropriately, should be selling price per unit. All right. So from your selling price per unit, you need to basically deduct your total variable costs per unit. So I'm just going to fetch that there from the scenario. So okay, let's fetch it together. So it's 550 and 350 there. All right. Maybe let's do that. Okay. And then you've got your 350 here. I believe that one was 400. All right, let's make it negative. And then it was 400 and 220. 400 and 220. So let's make it negative again, because it's going to be a deduction there. Okay. If I may, let me put this in. Okay. Can't see what's going on there for a second. Just give me a moment. All right. I think that looks better now. Right, that's contribution per unit. But before we conclude that, we can just see what else has been included there. So the story simply ends there. Management of tennis is considering discontinuing the Wilson rackets. If they discontinue these rackets, they forecast the sales of B for July 2015 to increase by 600 rackets. And then they will be sold at a 10% discount. So there's nothing else that's mentioned. So again, in a more exam-like questions, you also have different types of variable costs, but the principle is you are deducting your variable cost from your selling cost, so from your selling price. So your variable cost is obviously going to be including all your direct manufacturing costs, and then you also want to look at, since it's variable cost, non-manufacturing costs, which are period costs, but variable period costs, which will be, in those circumstances, we'll be looking at maybe variable selling and distribution for the most part, right? Which is variable selling costs. Those are the ones that you normally be dealing with there. So bear in mind again, remember that we've already covered a situation where you've got mixed costs, right? So mixed costs will have a portion in them of a variable element and a fixed element in them. So the only thing that you do on that is to separate between those costs, right? And for the most part, it's the high and low method. So just re-go through the high and low method. I think the notes that I posted first time should have that, the formula for the high and low method. So that's the only variation that you might just get here. All right, so I think we can safely come up with the contribution per unit here by simply deducting your variable costs from your selling price. But what you need now, what we need is the sales mix. Why do we need it? Because it's going to help us to get the contribution batch or contribution per batch. So whenever we talk of a batch, we are not talking of one product, it's a combination of two. So it's the weighted contribution basically, right? I think it should be correctly written that way, right? Weighted contribution per batch. More appropriate, weighted contribution per batch. But how are we weighting it? We are basically using the sales mix. So there was a question, one person was asking if the sales mix is the same as the manufacturing mix. So it's not exactly the same. In principle, it's not the same. Sales is what you sell. Manufacturing is what you manufacture, right? But again, it almost becomes the same under the circumstances that your assumption here in this is under cost, volume, and profit analysis. Your assumption is that you sell everything that you produce. So under those circumstances, then your sales and your production basically becomes the same thing, right? So this is what we are up to get now, right? Which is basically our sales, right? Which is basically our sales. So you want to see now, what did we budget to sell, right? And then in as far as what we budgeted to sell, it must just be the same as what we budgeted to produce, right? Which is right here. So based on the sales forecast, so this is the forecast, this is what we are budgeting, is 400 B and then 200 on that. So which means it's a mix of 400 to 200 in that ratio, 400 to 200. So we can put that up there, right? But we can as well put it as a working. So 400, we can divide 400. So we are basically reducing this to its lowest terms. So we can basically divide that by 200, and then that 200 we can divide by 200 there. That's the working for that. So you're basically reducing that to its lowest terms. So it's gonna be 2:1. That's your mix there.
Mr. Ndando.
All right. Yes.
What's the difference between sales mix and sales ratio?
Sales mix and sales ratio.
Yes.
All right. From a production perspective, from a production perspective and the costing perspective, it's just the same thing, right? It's just about the same thing, except that sometimes if it's a sales ratio, it's gonna be put up as it might even be put up as a what you call these things as a percentage and all that, but it's basically the same thing, we are measuring the same thing there.
Okay.
So there we go now. And then, right, this is what we have. So what we do now, based on this, I think I could pretty much, because we want to weight this now, right? We want to weight this. So you're simply multiplying your contribution there, your contribution per unit on that product by how much you expect to sell there in terms of the ratio that we have, right? Or in terms of the mix, right? And then here, we are also doing the same thing. So let's just drag this over there. All right, so what's the weighted? Now we've said this is weighted, no? Now we've said this is correctly called weighted contribution. It's basically gonna be 300 plus 130, right? So we can, let's put it there, right? 300 plus 130. So this is what we need there, the 430. That's the amount that we need as our, let me just bring in somebody from the weighting. Right. Just give me a second. Somebody's waiting for us to. Right. Okay. All right. So now we do have our weighted contribution. So where do we take it? We just take it and slot it in there. We say the amount there is 430. Right. So we are sorted there in principle. So we just need to divide now. I've got a little calculator here. 37,840 divided by 430 basically gives us 88. Okay. So we put that up there as 88. Right. But we are not done now. Right. Break even. So our break-even units is basically gonna be, if you wanna start with, let's say, how should I present this now? Right. Maybe because they want break-even value, so let's put it straight up. Break-even value, let's say let's start with B, bullet. Right. This is gonna be, so break-even units for bullet is gonna be 88 times. You come back to the sales mix. So you see, we are selling it at a ratio of 2:1. So there it's gonna be 2, right? But again, because we are looking for the value, then we wanna get the selling value of that product. And we wanna get how much it's being sold for. So it's 550. So we wanna multiply it there by 550. So should the question simply want you to do the break-even units, then you just stop at 88 times 2. And that should suffice there. So 88 times 2 gives you 176. Multiply 176 times 550 gives you a whopping 96,800. Right. So you take that there and put it there. 96,800. Now we need break even value for Wilson. Right. We are following the same methodology. So it's 88, but we're selling this one at 1. Right. But what's the selling price? It's 350. Okay. So there you go. So we have that there. Right. So 88 times 1 times 350, that gives us 3,800. So this is value, by the way. So this is in rands. This is all in rands. All right, any questions on this one? Any questions on this one? So the only slightly complicated thing that we will get on this here is gonna be what constitutes your variable cost, what you need to do to arrive at your variable cost, and the fixed cost. That's basically that. I think I'm gonna retake the assignment question again next time in our practice so that we can see how we should be maneuvering through the variable costs and the fixed costs there. All right, let's jump on to the next question. All right, so based on the same principle here, calculate the budgeted break-even sales value for tennis division for July 2015, assuming that the management have decided to discontinue the production of Wilson. So that issue there that we read about. So it's a pretty straightforward question. It's all right. So let me cut this here. Right. Pretty straightforward. So I think let's just take the formula as it is here. We want to reapply this formula there. All right, so most of the calculations we have done, right? So we can always refer up there. So it's 37,840. 37,840. And then you look at the spelling of weighted here. All right, then the weighted contribution now it's not exactly gonna be weighted since we are only gonna be dealing with one product there. So it's not exactly weighted contribution, but instead, okay, we're dealing with this division here. So they have discontinued the Wilson, so we are only left with this one here. So what has our contribution? So basically, the racket will be sold at a 10% discount, right? So which means our selling price is basically going to be reduced by 10%, and then but the variable costs are not going to change, right? So that's the only adjustment that we are making there. Right, so this we can put it up there. So 350, if this is reduced by 10%, then we will remain with 90% of that. And then we can as well deduct 220 is not going to change there, right? So that's the only adjustment that we are making there, right? Let's just do the calculation here. So it's 350 times 0.9, which is 90%, minus 220. So that's going to land us on 95. It's quite a huge drop. It's quite a huge drop there. Okay, so 37,840 divided by 95. That's what we need there. What does that give us? 37,840 divided by 95, 398.31. So remember, with break even, you always round up. So this is gonna be 399. This is what we are supposed to do there. Sorry, I should delete this. And then, right, that is basically what we are supposed to do there. Right, so this is gonna be 399, but we need this in we basically need this as a value, right? We want this as a sales value, so we can conclude value is equal to, so we already have the break-even minutes 399. Now we should multiply that by the selling price, right? But the selling price has been compromised. So 90% times 350. Right, so I believe this I can run on a calculator on the side. So it's 399 times 0.9 times 350. So that should give us 125,685. 125,685. Pretty easy. So the only adjustments there, the only thing that that you should be on the lookout for is how are you treating this adjustment here, right? Just that adjustment here. All right, let's jump to the next question. All right, advise the management whether it will be good, whether it will be a good decision to continue the sales of Wilson tennis rackets or not. Right? So in other words, is it a good idea to discontinue that? Okay, so support your answer with calculations and comment regarding the different options, and then also consider a non-financial factor. Okay, that's okay. Oh, okay, sorry, I need this one there. Right, so this is the question that comes right after. All right, so what do we know so far? So what we know so far, we have our contributions, then we have our fixed costs, which are basically the same for both, right? Which are basically the same for both. And then what do we know again? We basically, okay, we've talked about the contribution, different contributions. I think we have this one here at 95, and then previously we had another way. All right, but in any case, let's see what we can do, how we can arrange this here. Right, so one way in which this can be presented, on the far right, let's look at a situation where we've decided to discontinue, and then here, let's say not discontinue. All right. Looks big now. All right. Or rather, okay, let me do this one. I've got an idea. Let's just put this one there. All right. So if we decide to not discontinue, we basically have both of these products there, right there. Then if we decide to discontinue, we are gonna remain with just one. All right. So these are the amounts there. Right. Let's do that this way. All right. So with the information that's given now, we need to be dealing with relevant costs, right? Relevant incomes and relevant costs. So in other words, these are the costs that are affected by the decision that we are going to make, or the decision that we are not going to make. So that's what determines whether a cost is relevant or not. Okay. So what do we need? We need our contribution. Right. So no need to recalculate contribution here because we already did up there. Right. So our contribution, I think we had it there for the first one. It was 150 and 130 there. So 150 and 130, and then there it went up. It went down. So it went down to 95 on that one. All right, and then let's say sales units. Sometimes in an exam situation, there are a lot of other costs that we need to take in, that we might have to take into consideration. But in principle, we are basically looking for the relevant costs. So in other words, costs that you wouldn't incur, right? And incomes that you wouldn't get if you do not go if you do not go with a certain decision, right? So I think in terms of sales, we have that there as 400. No? Then we have that one there as 200. And then we need for probability if there's gonna be, if the product is gonna be discontinued, if the other product is discontinued. So they say the sales are gonna increase to 600. So we need that 600 there. So we do have it. All right. So let's do this now. All right. I want to make this as clear as possible. Right. All right. So if we multiply these here, we should get our total contribution. We should get our total contribution here. So we are basically multiplying the contribution per unit by the number of units that we expect to produce and sell. So we get 60,000 on that one, and then nothing there. So why did I put this up? I put this up to get the total, right? For comparison's sake. So let's put that, or we can even put it up there. So your total is 60,000 plus. All right. So this is your decision now, ladies and gentlemen. The one is gonna give you, if you do not discontinue Wilson, you are basically gonna be getting a contribution of 86,000, a total contribution of 86,000. If you discontinue it, you are only gonna be getting 57,000. So that's a fairly easy decision for you to make there. So which means based on these calculations here, then you basically need not to discontinue Wilson, right? You need to keep producing Wilson. So remember, the principle of contribution is that your fixed costs, you are always gonna incur your fixed costs. So your fixed cost is basically an irrelevant cost in this instance. So there's no need for you to take it into consideration, right? Because it's an irrelevant cost. Whether you decide to discontinue or not to discontinue, you are going to incur those fixed costs. But your contribution now, in principle, the term contribution was deliberately chosen because we are talking about how much a product is contributing towards lowering your fixed costs, because you will incur your fixed costs whether you like it or not. But at the end of the day, you must manufacture your product in such a way that you are gaining, right? It's contributing something towards your fixed cost. So at the end of the day, this is contributing a lot more, right? 86,000. So which means you need to go with that decision. So what's the decision? Do not discontinue. All right. Now let's jump to the next question. I don't know if you have any questions on that. I don't know if you have any questions on that. Seems pretty clear. It was only 5 marks, except of course that what we haven't mentioned here is the theory part where they say, all right, what other non-quantitative factor can you take into consideration there? What other non-quantitative factor can you take into consideration there? Let me just take you to the question there. All right. Support your answer with appropriate calculations and comment regarding the different options, right? And then also consider a non-financial factor. What non-financial factor can you think of? What non-financial factor can you think of? Over to you. You can just unmute yourself and let me know what non-financial factor you might want to take. So this is theory. In theory, I think you know by now that you get quite a lot of theory questions here, which includes something similar to what I'm asking now. So what the question is basically saying is, besides the calculations that you've done here, what other factor can you think of that can help you decide whether or not you should discontinue this product? Anybody? Anyone? You are free to unmute yourself and let me know what you think on that question. What you might want to take into consideration there. Anybody? Because now you're deciding, should you discontinue this or should you not discontinue this? Okay, so it's quite a number of things that you can look at here. And by the way, when it comes to theory questions like these, it's gonna help you a lot because once you've answered a question like this, you've basically answered every other question that's related to this, because the factors that you deal with are the same over and over again. So some of the qualitative factors that you might want to be dealing with here, maybe you want to look at the trend, right? The predicted trend. Because sometimes remember that you might want to discontinue a product because it's not doing enough sales today, but what's your prediction in the near future, right? So again, you might want to consider even some social factors, right? Some social factors in terms of what does this racket mean to the kids and the likes. So it's basically a number of things, a number of factors that you can think of. So here you're allowed to think outside the box, right? But let's not waste a lot of time on this one, right? We'll make a session. I think we should make a session where we are basically tackling all possible theory questions, right? All possible theory questions. All right, so prepare a statement reconciling the budgeted profit to the actual profit in respect to, in respect of the gymnastics division for June 2015 in as much detail as permitted by the information provided. All right, so let's see. They have their preference here. They have their preference here because they are saying now we need to clearly, right, we need to clearly show or indicate the relationship between the budgeted profit and the standard profit. So I think we can make our starting point there, right? The budgeted profit. So this is where we are gonna start. The budgeted profit. Okay, it's gonna be a big B there. So I think I'm gonna put our monies here. We're gonna put the monies there. All right, just as a starting point, let's talk about the relationship between budgeted profit and standard profit. Right, the budgeted profit, difference between budgeted profit and standard profit is we make budgets, okay, ideally, say every month, right, at the beginning of every month or before the beginning of a month, we come up with budgets, right? So a budget is basically gonna be based on what we budget to produce and sell, right? What we budget to produce and sell, what we intend to produce and sell, right? So the budget is obviously gonna involve, let me put this way. Let me put it up on Excel. Yes, maybe let me put it there. So let's take, for instance, let's say budgeted sales. Right? Budgeted sales, I want you to watch the difference now. Budgeted sales would be equal to your budgeted units right, will be equal to your budgeted units. Then you multiply your budgeted units by your standard selling price. Your standard selling price, right? So which in this respect here, your standard selling price is just as good as your budgeted selling price, but we specifically use the word standard because we are dealing with it at a unit basis, right? So we simply call it a standard selling price. But now, when it comes down to, say, standard sales, now we are dealing with now we are adjusting this. Now we are adjusting this budgeted units to the actual quantity that was dealt with, right? To the actual quantity, and still multiplying that there by the standard selling price, obviously per unit. So this is gonna be the difference. So the difference is if you're dealing with, for example, what we call a flexible budget. A flexible budget, you are basically using the standard selling price, standard costs, right? Standard costs and standard revenues, and then you are multiplying it by, you have basically varying the number of units there. That's what you call a flexible budget, right? You are basically flexing the quantity there. So in other words, if you are saying your selling price is 12 rand, right? Your selling price is 12 rand. So if you're flexing a budget, you are saying what's going to be your sales value if you sell, say, 5,000, and then what's going to be your sales value if you sell 7,000. So this is what basically gives you your standard sales there. So that's going to be, so it's the same principle here. That's going to be differentiating between the budgeted profit and standard profit. So basically, we have our budgeted profit. We can simply calculate our budgeted profit based on the budgeted information. But when it comes to the standard profit, then you are basically flexing that, right? You are basically flexing that. So in other words, you are making an adjustment there on your quantities, right? You are basically making your adjustment there on your quantities. All right. So let's cut to the chase. Let's cut to the chase. All right, so budgeted profit, let's see if we are given our budgeted profit. Let's see if we are given our budgeted profit. So now we are dealing with this division here. All right, so we are dealing with budgeted. Our starting point is budgeted. So this is where we end so far. All right, so the gymnastics division uses a highly automated manufacturing process with no human intervention, and therefore there is no labor to produce this equipment. So this division makes use of direct costing system, right? And then the standard cost for one of its product, which is the gym door for the month, is given as that. So the standard cost per unit for the gym door, this is how it's given. So the kgs required, etc. So the cost basically boils down to 168 there. So in order to arrive at the budgeted selling price per unit, the division needs to apply an 80% markup on the standard variable costs there. right? And then the divisions, as the division budgeted to manufacture and sell 10,000. So this is the quantity that we're dealing with there. So they basically budgeted 10,000 there, right? So this is the quantity as per the budget. This is the quantity there as per the budget. All right, but we will proceed from there and see. All right, so because we are dealing with a quantities variance again, right after that, and we said our starting point is us calculating the budgeted profit. So we are going to base our calculation on this 10,000. The first calculation is going to be based on this 10,000 there, because that's what we budget to manufacture and sell. All right, so but what are we doing with that? So we have, so the assumption here is the only cost that we incur, the only variable cost that we incur, because we need to apply this 80% markup there. So the only standard variable costs that we incur are the ones that are given here. All right. So which means, put it plainly, if you basically take this 168, you multiply it by 10,000, it's going to give you the total variable costs. And then if you add 80% of that, it should give you should basically, since these are variable costs, it should basically give you your contribution. So we can start off, if you like, we can basically, maybe we can do just a one-line calculation here, not too complicated for us. Okay, you can basically do a one-line calculation there. So because we need profit, we should remember our formula for profit is going to be your contribution less your fixed production overheads, right? Contribution minus your fixed production overheads. That will basically give you your profit. So how do you get contribution? So we know that an 80% markup is applied there. So which means 80% of that amount will basically give us that contribution. And then if we deduct our fixed costs from that, we should basically arrive at our profit. All right, so it's 168 times 80%. So what does that give us? Basically gives us our contribution, and then times, we are dealing with 10,000 units, and then now we want to deduct our budgeted fixed overheads there, which is 725. So we then deduct 725 from that 725,000. All right, so we simply put that up there. 168 times 0.8 times 10,000 minus 725,000. This is going to give us the profit. I think I'm making some mistake here. Shouldn't give us that. Let's see. Okay, sorry, times 10,000 there. Right, this is what it gives us. So it's 168 times 0.8 times 10,000 minus 725. Right, that's what we get. All right, now, because the question requires us now to draw a nexus between our budgeted profit and our standard profit, then we need to make some sort of adjustments there to get us to our standard profit. So let's put up our standard profit there. Let's put up our standard profit there. So our standard profit, we are going to calculate there. But for us to get there, then what do we adjust for? Right, as I already explained, now the only difference between your budgeted profit and your standard profit, because both of these are basically gonna have within them are basically gonna have within them your, actually they're basically gonna have within them your, what you call this, the same budgeted information in terms of this 168 and that 8 there, right? It's the same budgeted information. So in other words, the budgeted profit is most likely gonna be the same there, right? It's basically gonna be the same there. But then again, remember that your fixed costs are not gonna be affected, right? Your fixed costs basically stay the same, whether it's standard profit or budgeted profit. So the only difference that you have there is only on your sales volume, right? It's only going to be on your sales volume. So we are going to adjust that now. All right, so this is the last question that we're doing. So we are going to be done pretty soon. All right, so this is what we budgeted to do, 10,000, but the actual that we did was 10,200. So we need to make that adjustment now, right? We basically need to make that small adjustment on that one. All right, so obviously if we sold a lot more than what we budgeted for, then it basically means it's gonna be a favorable, because you can see here 10,200 and then there it was 10,000. So it basically means we did a little bit more there. So which means we are almost happy with that there. All right, so let's clean that up. Let's clean that up. So we are dealing with 10,200 and then 10,000. Right. So what are we multiplying that by? We are basically multiplying that by our contribution there. So 168 times 80%, which is what we gain. So we know it's favorable, so we can as well keep it positive. So it's 200 times 168 times 0.8. So that should basically land us there on 26,880. So that's gonna be favorable there. All right, so maybe we can say, since we are dealing with variance analysis, then we can as well call this sales volume or sales margin, sorry, sales margin volume variance. Right, we could call that there. So what's the big deal now? Remember, this is contribution, right? Why are we using contribution? Because in some instances we might have to use gross profit, right? We might have to use gross profit, because I'm sure you should know that sometimes a sales margin does give you, or you can get a sales margin using gross profit, right? But the determining factor here is what costing method are they using. So here they are basically using direct costing. I think we read that there. So if it's direct costing, then you are basically with you're basically going to be dealing with contribution there. That's the big deal. So once you adjust for that there, since it's an addition, then that's going to give you 645,880. So what's the 645,880? This is going to be your standard profit there. This is basically going to be your standard profit. But the story doesn't end there. The story doesn't end there. We've only covered part of it. All right, so we need to work our way down to actual profit now. Right, we need to work our way down to actual profit. But let's start with what we are given now. Let's basically deal. So assume that the combined material mix variance, right? So we have a material mix variance amounted to 16,000 and it's favorable, right? 16,000 and it's favorable. So let's put that there. 16,000 materials mix variance. It's going to be 16,000. So if it's favorable, we're gonna put it as positive, right? If it's favorable, we're gonna leave it as positive, and then consisting of that and that. And then what other one do we have? We have an adverse, a combined yield variance of 33. Right, so let's say material yield variance. Then apparently it's also positive, right? It's also favorable, 33,600. Right, let's put that up there. It's 33,600, so we keep it positive. All right, so let's see now what else what other variances we can come up with there. All right, so we need, all right, from what's given now, we need to calculate a material's purchase price variance, right, per material type. All right, and then we also need to calculate the material usage variance, right? So we need to calculate the material usage variance. Okay, that's okay. But let's start off with this one because it's right in our face there. Materials purchase price variance. All right, so let's go and assess now on the question how best we can calculate that. Okay, we are dealing with this division now. What we are dealing with this division. So basically we have material X, Y, Z, material X, Y, Z. Okay, and then now we want the price variance, right? So the price variance is obviously going to be the standard price minus the actual price, and then we want to multiply that by the actual quantities, right? We want to multiply that by the actual quantities. So since we're dealing with variable materials with numerous materials like this, we can as well make a table, right? Let's put it there. I should say material X, Y, and Z. So let's say standard price. Standard price. And then we can make this the actual price here. And then we want the difference, right? The difference in prices here. And then let's say this is the actual quantity. Actual quantity. So if we multiply that there, it's going to give us the variance. Right. All right, so the actual standard price is 120, 32, and 16. 120, 32, and 16. Right, what was the actual price now? What was the actual price now? So, right, or rather, we should put 13, 16, and 8. So we deal with this per kg, right? 13, 30, 16, and 8, so that we don't have to make any adjustments there, right? So 30, 16, and 8. So this is the cost per kg. Right. So what about the actual? So the actual now, we are told that in total, the cost was for X, the cost was 1,260,000 when we did 40,000 kgs, right? When we did 40,000 kgs, and then I think we can as well be doing the calculation there. So we want per kg, the actual price per kg. So if it was 1,260 like that, and then we were doing 40,000 kgs, then basically the price there is gonna be 31.5 per kg, right? Then here it was 288,000, and then we bought 18,000. So we can repeat the same calculation there, right? We can basically repeat the same calculation there, but for test and examination purposes, you definitely need to show the calculation on this, where your amounts are coming from. All right, and then this one is 165 divided by 22, right? 165,000 divided by 22,000, that's going to give you 750. All right, so now we want to make, let's just say we want to make our, okay, let's say our actual price minus our standard price. Okay, so once it's positive in this way, then we would know, right? Once it's positive in this way, we would know that it's okay. But because it's a purchase, let's do it the other way around, okay, so that we can maintain the whole principle that when it's negative, it's adverse. So if it's a purchase, let's say standard price minus actual price. So once it's negative like that, then we know we actually paid a lot more than what we had budgeted for. Right. So we do what we did there. Right. Let's see how I think this can look better with this. All right. So what were the actual quantities? I think the first one was 40,000, right? 1, 2, 3, and then the next one must have been 18,000 and then 22,000. Right, 18,000 and then 22,000. All right. And let's create a good impression again there, but we are going to do it this way. All right. So what's the variance? So now we are multiplying the difference in price times the quantity there. So we are starting off with negative 60,000, and then we've got that there. So which means in total, then it's just going to be 11,000 plus nil plus 60,000. So we should have an adverse of 49,000, right? So we can take that 49,000 there and put it there. So that's our adverse. All right. So what is a materials mix variance, right? And then a materials yield variance. What are those? Right? What are those? Right? We're gonna get to that a little bit later, but let's just see if there's anything else. Right? So our whole aim there is to get to our actual profit, right? Is to get to our actual profits there. So what have we calculated so far? So we've done 1, 2. So this we haven't done. This is what we are gonna get to, right? And then the materials price variance. Now this is what we just calculated, and then the materials usage variance. Now, when we talk of the materials usage variance, you are basically coming right here, right? You are basically coming right here. You know what has been your usage. So basically, you know that as per standard, you are supposed to use 4 kgs for you to get a unit of GMDO, 4 kgs of X, 2 of Y, and then 2 of Z. So if there is a usage variance there, it's a situation where you've used 3 there, or you've used 1.5, or you've used 3 there. So which means you have basically used it differently there, right? So that basically gives you your a different mix there, a different usage, right? That basically gives you a different usage there. So this could be as a result of, say, some wastages. Maybe sometimes you could have purchased, poor quality material X, poor quality material Z, etc., which might require you to use a lot more than what you are using there. But in any case, here we are not given enough information to arrive at that. Okay, we are not given enough information to arrive at that. So hence we were given there, right? We are actually given that information, right? But other than that, here I think we can calculate. So for starters, we did calculate. Let's see what the selling price is, right? So we have the actual selling price now, right? We have the actual selling price. So which means given that selling price there, and then the budgeted selling price that we had there, which means we can pay, there is a variance. Obviously, it's not going to be the same, the fact that we've been given that there. So which means we can pretty much run up a calculation there, right? We can pretty much run up a calculation on that to see what the variance is there, right? So we can call that our sales margin price variance, right? Or simply our selling price variance. I think I'm just going to call it simply selling price variance. So we are almost done with this question. Right, so with the price variance, so what you need to know, the formulas, right? The formulas that you need to do when it comes to price variances. So if it's a price variance, what needs to be varied or what's being compared is the price. So which means you need to put the price inside the bracket, right? You basically need to put the price inside the bracket. And then because it's a cost or it's a monetary value, then you're going to be dealing with the actual quantity. So let's start with the quantity that we know, 10,200. So we are multiplying 10,200 by, now we want to deal with, we basically want to deal now with the price. So the actual price was 302.4, but what was the standard price? So the standard price, I think we can get it on that calculation there, right? We can simply get it there on that calculation. So how do we go about that? So we know that they put 80% markup on those costs. So it's going to be 168. So if you put a markup on that, it's 168 times 1.8. So that should basically give you that. So maybe we can quickly do 168 times 1.8 there to see what it gives us. So it gives us 3.2. So it basically gives us, looks like it's giving us the same amount there, right? Is it the same amount? Right, let's see what was, okay, sorry, no, the actual selling price was 305, sorry. So the actual selling price there is 305. So we can put that there as 305 on that one, 305. And then this one here is that 302.4, right? That gives us 302.4. So we can already see that we have a positive variance there, something that is favorable. So we can simply punch it in there, 10,200, and we're multiplying that by 305 minus 168 times, sorry, 168 times 1.8 times 1.8, right? So that basically gives us 26,520. So that's going to be a positive one there. All right, so our calculation is going to start off from there, right? Our calculation is basically going to start off from there. And then the one last thing here, because we want to arrive at, right, because our whole intention is to arrive at actual profit, right? So which means basically to get to our actual profit again, we need to take into consideration if there were any changes in our fixed overheads, right? We want to take into consideration if there were any changes in our fixed overheads there, right? So the total fixed production overheads were 778. We had budgeted for 725, right? We had basically budgeted there for 725. So the difference between those is gonna be our fixed overhead variance. So fixed overhead variance. So right, so what's the fixed overhead variance? So let's just have a look again and see. So it's 778. So let's say 725 minus 778. Right, 725 minus 778. And unfortunately, this one is an adverse. All right. 725 minus 778. So that basically gives us there our 53, and it's adverse. All right, so I think basically included everything there. So we are going to arrive at our actual profit. Actual profit, so which is basically a summation of all of that there. So we are starting there right now to the end. So we have our 620 there. So we can basically conclude it like that. So I don't know if we have any questions. I think we are at 8:30 now, which is our finishing time. I do not know if we have any questions. I don't know if we have any questions.